This is Lightning Power Lunch, presented by Reef Rum on the Lightning Audio Network with Dave Mishkin and Greg Linnelli.
The disappointing part of it was the inconsistency, and if you've listened to me, and over the years, consistency is the key, and you play consistently well. You're not going to win every single game, but you're going to give yourself a chance to, and usually have positive results. And I just thought there were some periods of brilliance and some periods of not so much. And we've got to start erring on the side of brilliance more than the other. So there was a lot of good things to pull from. In the 4 games, we get 4 points. Would have liked to snuck in at least another one there, but that's over with now. And now we're going to start winning games at home.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Start winning some games at home. Home is where the heart is typically, and the Lightning hoping to have that. Braydon Coburn will be joining us in just a little bit to talk about this Lightning team and where they are. We've had some questions come in since our last show. Dave Mishkin's on the other side. Steve Ersnick is our producer. Some good news. Looks like Cooch partner is back. And,
Yes.
He's practicing. Lines maybe have changed a bit.
We pre-taped yesterday, so
Yeah.
we were off the air before the Lightning hit the ice, and Kucherov skated yesterday, too. I was actually over. We're live today, so I was over at practice, which started at 11. I don't live far from there, so I caught about the first 30 minutes and hoofed it back home to come on the air with you.
Yep.
And Kobe will be joining us in about 15 minutes. But yeah, so Kucherov is playing with Cirelli and Hagel. So Kucherov and Point are on separate lines. And when they are separated, you kind of know that it may not be like a 5-alarm fire going off, but John Cooper is seeing a lot of things that he's not liking, to the point that he feels he needs to separate those two. And sometimes it's that line is not really going, and sometimes it's more about what else is happening. Kucherov, of course, didn't play on Friday or Saturday night last weekend. So Gonsalves, Gensel, and Point are a line. Kucherov, Cirelli, and Hagel are a line. They're keeping that Gord, Bjorkstrand, Pontus Holmberg line intact. And we have seen Girgensons skating now. He skated yesterday. He skated today. He was taking a rotation with that other line of Chafee, Douglas, and Finley. Coop said that Girgensons, they were looking at the weekend, which would mean not tomorrow night. But I don't know. I mean, he took some line rushes on that fourth line where, he was in and one of the other guys wasn't taking the line rush. So we'll see. On D, because the Lightning have 70, Crozier's going to miss the games this weekend. We got that news yesterday from Coop as well. So that kind of clarifies why they called up Destu. He's now the 7th defenseman. But they chose to make him the 7th defenseman into this week as opposed to, let's say, Santini, who was called up last week. And because they were rotating the D, it wasn't entirely clear based on how they ran things today exactly how it was going to unfold. But I'll mention this, Greg, for what it's worth. Lightning spent some time at the beginning working on the power play. Power play 1, we know what power play 1 looks like with Kucherov out there. Power play 2, Darren Radish was the one defenseman out there. But the second time that power play 2 got reps, and it was a 5-on-0 situation where they're just kind of working the puck around to maybe set up some options, it was Destu. So I said yesterday, I think they called him up to play him. He got stick taps at the post-practice stretch yesterday, which usually happens when a player is going to be going in, even though it's 2 days away from the game. Now we're 1 day away from the game. I think he's in. And if you're putting a left-handed defenseman into the lineup, you know that Victor Hedman and Ryan McDonough are not coming out of the lineup. I mean, unless they're injured, but they look totally fine out there. And J.J. Moser's been playing the right side. So I said yesterday, I think Destu, if he comes in, and I think he's coming in, will be in for Lilleberg. But we'll see.
Yeah.
At the D pair rushes yesterday, Destu was kind of the 7th defenseman based on what I saw. I wasn't at practice yesterday. So probably tomorrow will be an optional at Benchmark International Arena. So we may have to just kind of speculate until the game starts.
It's exciting. for a guy making his potential debut. You know, you always get excited for somebody like that, and we talk about new life being thrown into the team to get things humming along potentially. We'll see if that plays out. Good to see Cooch back. I mean, I think we all thought, illness, and he's going to, do what he does, and hopefully an opportunity for him to kind of reset as well, because I do think you don't want to be too simplistic in your analysis, but in many ways, sometimes the simplicity is the way to go. You go as far as your stars, and you have your role players support when needed. And would we be having a different discussion today if the Kucherovs, the Points, and the Hagels were humming along a little bit more? Probably not. Record's probably a little bit different. And, we're probably sitting here saying, yeah, they can clean some things up, but boy, they probably earned 4 more points than what they have right now, and you're looking at things a little differently. Be that as it may, slumps happen, and I'd rather have the Lightning go through a little bit of a funk now than maybe at another point during the season when, I don't want to say points are more valuable, but certainly you're looking at things a little closer because you're getting closer to the playoffs. I mean, each game you're getting closer to the finish line, and you'd rather have some separation midway through the season, even towards the end, where if you have a slump, it's not as damaging. Beginning, if you get behind the 8 ball, yeah, you have the rest of the year to make it up, but partner, you also know too, with a 3-point game, the way it is in parity, I feel like that's a harder thing to sell than it was 25, 30 years ago. I just do. I think the competition's tougher. I mean, look at some of the teams who are getting off to a good starts this year, who maybe some people didn't think. And, the Lightning just have to do a better job of keeping their head above water right now until their stars, I think, regain their footing. When they do that, it'll probably lessen the exposure or lack of production from the bottom 6 a little bit more because you're so focused on the great starts that these guys have had. But I think everybody, not including the goaltenders, has had more downs than ups, and that's why we're kind of focusing on it.
That's what we heard from Coop.
Yeah.
I mean, team-wide, he said, there was some not so good, which he's stating facts.
Yeah.
I mean, if you followed the first 6 games for the Lightning, they've had stretches of, let's just say, play that is not even close to their standard.
Yep.
And look, he's right. Had they gotten another point out of the road trip, either held on in Columbus and not surrendered the go-ahead goal in the third period, gotten the game to overtime, even if they lost it, they would have gotten a point. Had they won one of the 2 games that they got to overtime, they would have gotten an extra point. 5 out of 8 might have looked better than 4 out of 8. But on some level, the Lightning are where they are because they've kind of gotten what they've deserved.
Mm-hmm.
You can make the argument that they could have gotten a point and maybe should have gotten a point out of the opening game against Ottawa because they had the lead and it was 3-3 with under 2 minutes left in the third. But I think we came out of that game saying, they didn't play very well.
No.
So the fact that they got stuck with a regulation loss wasn't due to them, running into some incredible goaltending performance on the other side, or they made 3 total mistakes and all of them ended up in their net, or in this case 4 total mistakes. That was not what happened in the Ottawa game. Could they have won one of the overtime games on the road trip and added their point total? They could have, but they didn't even touch the puck in Washington, right? And in some ways, they were fortunate to get the game tied in Detroit based on how Gibson played in the third period. So, I mean, they could have come out of both of those games with no points. So it's hard to make the argument that, they really deserve more points than they have. Could they have gotten more points? They could have through 6 games, but they are where they are. And I think it just boils down to the fact that they need to play better. They need to play better as a team, and their top guys need to start producing more than what we have seen. And I think you have pointed out, Greg, and I think it's correct of you to point this out, the track record for these top guys on the Lightning, that track record tells us that this is not going to continue indefinitely. They are going to get it turned around because that's what they've done throughout their NHL careers. The flip side of that coin, though, is if they don't, the Lightning are going to have a hard time. And that's true of any team. You need your top guys to be, producing for you and impacting play in a positive way.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, look, This doesn't matter if your star players aren't, if they're all having an off year, it's going to make it really difficult to do anything, let alone get into the playoffs. It just is, and I'm not telling you something you don't know. I mean, the year they didn't make the playoffs during this kind of run that John Cooper and his staff have been on, they were hit with some injuries. And
Yes,
I think
they were.
That is something you have to keep in mind. Could that happen? Of course it could. And
they also didn't play well for the middle third of that season. They were,
fair point.
I mean, that was probably the worst stretch of hockey, record-wise and play-wise, that the Lightning have produced during the John Cooper coaching tenure.
Yeah.
They had an okay start. It was okay. I mean, it was good enough. They were hitting their playoff pace. I've talked about this. And then they started getting the injuries. Actually, Stamkos got injured a little before Thanksgiving and, missed the rest of that year. And they had other injuries. Braydon Point ended up getting hurt as a rookie right around Christmas and missed a stretch of time where the Lightning were struggling into the All-Star break. Like, that was when they started turning it around coming out of the All-Star break, the last third of the season. And they made a furious push, but Johnson was injured. I mean, they had a lot of injuries, you're right, and significant injuries. And they had the goaltending situation too. Let's not forget that. Like,
good point.
The torch was passed from Bishop to Vasilevsky, and it's not like they didn't have a good relationship. They had a great relationship, but it was still different and difficult because you have a guy who's used to playing a lot, and now he's kind of being told, all right, you're going to play less because we want to hand the reins over to your successor, basically.
Yeah.
And for Vasi, it was an adjustment to playing more, right? So eventually they traded Ben Bishop at the deadline, and that trade ultimately turned into Eric Chernak, if we want to look at it that way.
Sure.
So it was a good trade. But like that, there was a lot happening that year that made things difficult. But the bottom line is, from basically late November until the end of February, beginning of March, the Lightning played extremely subpar hockey, lost a lot of games in regulation, fell into a hole out of which they couldn't pull themselves out of. When Kobe is on, we may ask him about it because he was part of that. And the furious push they had at the end. I mean, let's not forget, they went in their last 30 games, 20 wins, 6 losses, 4 overtime losses, and they missed the playoffs by a point. They had that pace, earlier in the year, they would have made the playoffs easily. So I think your point about like the one other time they missed the playoffs, yeah, they had injuries, but they also didn't play very well. And it was an extended period of poor play, let's say, that really hurt them. And you're right. If you fall into too deep of a hole, it can be difficult to pull yourself out of that hole, even if you go on an incredible hot streak like they did. I'm not talking about a hot streak for 10 days. I'm talking about a hot streak for whatever it was, 7 weeks.
Let's bring him in.
Yeah.
Let's bring in the
Kobe
former
remembers that.
NHLer
Stretch
Braydon
run.
Coburn, Lightning broadcaster.
He's a little blurry for
Is he
me. I'm
frozen?
not sure, yeah.
He is frozen.
We're going to reconnect.
We're
He
gonna
doesn't
get
want
him
to think
back.
about 2016, 17.
Can you blame him? Kobe, by the way,
Well, it's
part of
noteworthy because that's the only year that John Cooper, as a coach of an NHL team, his team has missed the playoffs where, we're excluding the year that he took over with a handful of games left.
by the
That
way,
is amazing, by the way. I mean,
it is amazing.
In this day and age, to be on a playoff run like that is pretty remarkable.
Along with Greg Wolf, part of the Block Party podcast.
Yes.
They had Tyler Johnson last week. JJ Moser just dropped today, so we want to make sure everybody checks that out. We actually had a question about Tyler Johnson as it relates to Connor Geeky and a skilled guy playing on a fourth line.
Yeah,
and we kinda
totally different situation.
We kind of went back and forth. We'll get to that question.
They're talking about Johnson in the
Yeah, yeah.
2021 playoffs.
Kobe.
But
Kobe,
is here.
Kobe. How are you, sir?
Good, gentlemen. How are you guys?
It's always it's good. It's always good to talk hockey with you. General thoughts the start of the season, because I think a lot of this, Kobe, are there some things that, maybe you're sticking out that the Lightning need to adjust, of course. But how much of this really is it's the beginning of the season and things are just fresh, and so people are looking at this differently than if this little slump was happening mid-season when, you're just kind of going through the grind. From somebody who played and now you're looking at games, from an analyst angle, how do you view the start to the season for Tampa Bay?
Well, I view it a little bit differently. I think sometimes you can be a slave to the schedule a little bit. Obviously, losing the first 2 games at home hurts, but going on the road and kind of having those back-to-backs like they did to start a season is not an easy way to kind of like find your game. I always thought that, the teams that were good on back-to-backs were teams that could really rely on the structure of their system and kind of what was going on. And sometimes at the beginning of the year, you don't have that yet. You don't have that identified. You don't have that solidified in your game. So those games can be tough. And this league and players in general and organizations, it's a slippery slope of confidence of trying to find what's going on, who are we going to be. And I just feel that a little bit, like there's just a little bit of, I think now there's really starting to be an uptick in, hey, we need to figure this out, and we need to figure this out quick, because 6 games is 6 games, but it's important to make sure that you're taking steps in the right direction, and it's easy to let things kind of slide in the wrong way. And we've seen teams that they get into a hole early in the season, and it's hard to really kind of claw your way out, because you're clawing over a bunch of different teams as you do that. But to me, it's been a little bit of a group that's, we all know it's a talented group, but they're just having a little tough time right now finding out how they're going to win hockey games and kind of what that formula is going to look like.
So, Kobe, we've heard from people on our show, and we've talked about it, but more importantly than us talking about it, we've heard it from players and John Cooper, these 2 words, execution and urgency. And the execution hasn't been good enough, consistent enough, and the urgency level hasn't been high enough, consistently enough. Do you agree that those are 2 kind of problem areas that might explain their record? And how do you fix those 2 areas?
Well, it's tough to disagree with the guy that's breaking it down, but I think, puck management is always something that I always kind of like fall back on, and it hasn't been good. Execution is an interesting one. When I look at the opportunities that they have generated and the times of the games, and I kind of always look at that too. Is like, when did this opportunity happen? And if this would have been executed, what does the outcome of the game look like comparative to a different outcome? And I agree wholeheartedly that execution, needs to get better. And I was at practice yesterday and watched this, and it was it was very obvious to me, the energy from the coaches about just performing and executing it and making sure that those kind of like loose ends that maybe you're kind of still residuals from summer training and kind of getting back into it, that we're going to snip these right away, and that we're going to kind of nip this in the butt, and we're going to have a pretty tight ship here. So for me, I think that's a pretty fair assessment of the play and maybe what needs to happen for them to start kind of finding their footing.
Braydon Coburn's with us. Kobe, that's an interesting point, and it brings us back to the conversation, potentially, how much should starters or regulars play in the preseason? If you feel like things are a bit off, maybe what you're bringing up, some would say, okay, well, then does that make the case that these guys need to play a little bit more in preseason? Of course, some would come back and say, well, this is a veteran group, and it shouldn't take them that long to get into the swing of things. When you see maybe the execution being off, can you look at the preseason and say that's part of the problem, maybe a lack of preseason? Or is this, it's a new year and it's not going to be the same as it was last year, and guys, it's going to take a while to get into sync?
Well, I think you guys have talked about it. I think generally, if you think about preseason, I thought it was a big success, and all the words coming out of camp was that it was a positive camp and there was lots of great things. Maybe those things came from a lot of the young guys. Maybe the veterans weren't quite at the right footing that they needed to be to kind of lead this ship when things start going. That's tough to say. And I think I don't want to group everyone together, because there's been some individual performances that I think have been very strong through the first 6 of the games, regardless of the record. But this is a team, and this is a team with championship aspirations and championship pedigree. And I just think that in the room, and those guys know that this kind of start from this caliber of club is unacceptable. And I think, as much as maybe we're worried, I think that those guys in there are very they have a strong feeling of what winning hockey is, and they're very dedicated to making sure that this thing gets back on track, and kind of maybe for some of the newer guys, showing them kind of some of that world-class leadership that this team's been kind of cultivating over the last 10 years.
So not to be all negative Nelly, one guy that we have talked about in very positive terms since he came back from his 2-game suspension was JJ Moser. I felt that he has been the Lightning's best defenseman so far this year. What have you seen from him this year, and what have you liked about his game? I know you just had him on the block party too.
Yeah, so. Well, there's a bunch of things I love about him. I love his attitude. I think he's an active defender. He doesn't let the game kind of like come to him. He's very active in that sense, very much like Victor Hedman. I think they complement each other well. I get kind of in a trance watching JJ a lot, just being the left-handed guy on the right side. And that's something I did in Philly a ton. Not so much when I was here with the Lightning, but I played with Kimmo Timonen, who's felt very, very comfortable on the left side. And he kind of said, hey, like, let's work on you on the right side. That we like this partnership. And so I'm always kind of just like, I don't want to say ISO camming, because I am watching the whole game. I am watching JJ on the right, and just kind of certain things that happen, and kind of using the context of like what I experienced when I was a left-handed defenseman on the right side, and how he plays certain pucks, and how he defends certain things. And that might have been a podcast for another day of just me talking to him about being a lefty on the right side, about defending guys and picking pucks up, and really the way you kind of perceive and see the ice. Sometimes when you're looking at your partner and you're in that D-to-D position, there's a portion of the ice that is closed off to you. To a certain sense, you're closing yourself off to make yourself available to your partner for a pass. So, but I've been impressed with it. There's few guys in the league that kind of have the skills to make that happen. And I think JJ's game is very strong on the right side. I think it's still growing. I think there's some things that he's going to do and he's going to figure out that is going to make that pairing of him and Hedman very strong. But I could tell right from the beginning that he's had a little bit of a chip on his shoulder. He understands maybe some of the things that he was lacking in his game last year, and I think that bite in his game is something that he's probably very focused on, and making sure that part of his defending really comes through. But like I said, he's not a big guy by any means, but I love the way that he kind of brings the fight and really challenges guys. And we talk about good stick and closing quick, and he's got the feet and the ability to do that, which is things that really impress me about JJ.
I'm curious to expand on that point, Kobe, about being a lefty on the right side, your opposite side. So what are some of the things from your perspective that you do need to have as a skill set to be able to pull that off? Because you're right, a lot of guys feel uncomfortable. Is it hockey IQ? Is it just, obviously positioning? Are you looking at more film? Are you what goes into that?
There's a couple things. Some of it is, basically kind of your form. Like for JJ, some of the things that really help him is that he's got excellent feet. So his feet are able to get around his body and really allow himself to kind of be crossed up and kind of facing the defender, and then cross and then reach across his body on his backhand to pull pucks. And the reason I say feet is because when you're doing stuff like that, you want to stay square, but kind of like having you can differentiate your lower body and your upper body, kind of have this ability to kind of pull pucks always to your strong side and your forehand side. Obviously, being able to pass and make passes on your backhand are very important. And some guys that I played with that are excellent players, they just been like, you know what, I'm really good on the left side. And I remember hearing a story about Nicholas Lindstrom being like, I'm one of the best guys on my forehand. Why would I want to ever go to my backhand? And inevitably, when you're on the right side, you're going to get forced onto your backhand a little bit more. So being comfortable in that sort of thing, I always found defending the rush on the right side as a left-handed defenseman was much, much easier. I felt like if someone was going to take me wide, that my top hand is on the outside. And that is just like, for me, and being a big, long guy, that was somewhere that no one was ever going to beat me around on the outside, because I kind of had that ability and that wingspan to cut them down. On the other side, I have to reach across my body to defend, but there's also challenges. I don't know if you guys remember the play it was actually hit the post in Detroit. A puck came around the wall. JJ he went to keep it in. It ends up hitting his backhand, goes off his foot, kind of goes, and then I can't remember which Red Wing forward came through, and he had an excellent opportunity to end that game before regulation. And to me, I was just kind of like, that's something that JJ is going to have to keep kind of evolving his game, is really handling pucks when they're not just like a good speed, but when it's like slap shot coming around the wall speed, whether it's like, hey, maybe I just let this one go, or maybe I try to make a play on it. Realizing sometimes you just got to cut bait and say like, hey, I'm not going to be able to handle this puck, and I don't know where it's going to go if I try to. So I think just little things like that. And honestly, he's still such a young defender. And I think really with time and being able to kind of experience more, I think he'd be a student of your mistakes. JJ's his game's going to keep evolving.
We're going to find out tomorrow if Charles-Edouard Destoux makes his NHL debut. It's an interesting story for him, because if he makes his NHL debut, he's not 20 or 21. He's not new to the pro game. He even went to Europe. He went to Europe and played a few years. So, like, where is a player like that relative to an actual, like, younger player new to the pro game? What advantages does a guy like Destoux have, having gotten the reps, even if it wasn't at the NHL level, at the minor league level, and playing at the top league in Europe?
Well, I think we've seen consistently through the years with this team that some of these guys that come up, they bring like a new energy, and sometimes it just kind of breaks up what's going on in the room. And there's, if things are going well, and injecting that new guy in the lineup and that new first game in the NHL energy is very positive. And he's I watched him yesterday, kind of seeing what kind of game he was. He's extremely poised. He's a guy that, he's making plays that I'm like, if this was my first NHL practice, like, I don't know if I'd be doing this, but he has that confidence, and he's obviously impressed this management to a certain degree, that they're like, it's his time to come up, and we could use him. So it'll be interesting to see if he gets in. I don't know if he will or not. He kind of practiced in that 5, 6, 7 hole. So we'll see where he does. But you always have to admire a guy that's been in the grind. He's been in the East Coast League. He's been in Europe. He's done all the things that a professional hockey player is trying to do, just to keep your head afloat and keep evolving your game. So it's really nice to see a guy like that be up here, whether it's for a game or two, or just being recognized by the organization for his hard work.
One of the things, Kobe, I think that's got to be challenging, particularly a young player who is a high draft pick, is to fulfill those expectations at the NHL level. Oftentimes you see a guy who's skilled, maybe doesn't have an opportunity to be in a top 6 right away, and is on a 3rd and 4th line, and maybe he's not getting the minutes for obvious reasons. I'm just curious, Connor Geekie and his mindset, young guy, still trying to prove himself, no doubt frustrated about, I think, where he is right now. What have you seen from Connor, or maybe what haven't you seen from Connor so far this year? Do you think going down to Syracuse and playing more minutes is going to help him? And then when he does eventually get up, do you look to him as somebody who can be more of a depth piece, or is he somebody you think, to really be effective, needs to play in a top 6?
Well, I think good players figure out any way to stick around, and he is such a young guy, and I'm thinking about, again, I don't know why, I do know why. I think about my own career coming up, and with the Atlanta Thrashers, and the first 2 years of my career was kind of up and down between the Chicago Wolves, and how sometimes the pressure you put on yourself is almost more than you can really kind of comprehend sometimes. And I think for Connor, it's a mindset thing. The kid has all the skills in the world. He's we can see how electric he can be. I watch him, and he's such a dynamic player, and I really believe that this is a top 6 forward all day long in the NHL. But it's hard when the points aren't coming for you, and you're a guy that's very used to points. And the other thing that sneaks into players' minds, whether they will admit it or not, is the comparison of other players in your draft year, which was only 3 years ago, that are playing in the NHL, that are having success. And that weighs on a player, and it's tough on a player to think that, hey, maybe what category am I falling into? So I think Connor Geekie is a guy that has a tremendous amount of confidence, but confidence can be a little bit trivial sometimes. And he's a guy that's going to have to kind of find his way, and whether that's going down to Syracuse and kind of just changing his mindset a little bit, and really kind of showing this organization that, like, you can't keep me down here. That's the goal, is that you're forcing the organization's hand by how dominant you are playing, how you are just really showing your class. So that's what I hope Connor Geekie takes this advantage of this opportunity and kind of uses as a reset and comes back, because he's going to be up at some point during this year again, and he's going to be a major part of the reason this club is successful, in my opinion.
Kobe, last question for you. I'm curious. We've taken a lot of questions about Curtis Douglas, the role he provides, and maybe more importantly, how he's looked playing in limited ice time. Have you been able to get a feel for what he can do beyond fighting? And do you think, look, he is here predominantly to make sure nobody does anything like we saw against the Florida Panthers? Can you get by with having a player like that consistently in the lineup? If he's playing 5-6 minutes, do you think there's more there for him in the limited action you've seen?
Well, maybe I'll get in trouble from Greg Wolf for this, but we had him on yesterday on the podcast on the block party, and he's just a really cool guy. Dougie 42 is just, but he, he's completely a guy that understands, what his role is. I think he really kind of wants to work on his game extremely hard. The thing that has impressed me with him is that, and his forechecking. Like, this is a guy that's 6'9". He can skate. He puts pressure on guys. And the times that I've seen him forecheck, and I'm watching the D-men to see what kind of play they make when he's kind of barreling down on them. And it's honestly, I would be interested to see kind of the breakdown of every single time he forechecked. For whatever reason, this is just kind of going off what I remember seeing, is that he kind of forced, maybe a simple play, or he kind of forced the defenseman to move the puck before they were really able to. So I think that's maybe an underrated part of his game. And, to think about a 6'9" guy and that reach and the ability to close quickly, and he does skate and get around the ice fairly well. I think that's going to be a real strength to his, outside of just being able to provide that kind of protection and that really kind of that size and physicality role that a lot of people are kind of putting him into the box of. I think there's something there in terms of really providing a little bit of an energy in that fourth line, and kind of, I think Julian said this, a guy and a team instilling that's hard to play against. And, when you're thinking about a guy forechecking like that, that's super hard to play against. The guy you're going to come trying to pinch down the wall, and he's able to counter pinch and hold the puck 4 or 5 feet away from you, and you're trying to reach it. Those are things he's going to develop. And again, he's so young in his game, and the fact that, I think there's a lot there, and I think they're committed to trying to develop him. I think there's going to be some patience there, and I think that's a really good thing.
I just have a follow-up on Douglas. What I've noticed about him, and again, he's played limited minutes, so it's been a very small sample size. Not just his ability to get on the forecheck. I've noticed, like, the long wingspan helps him as a fighter, but he's getting his stick in the way of where the defenseman on the other team is trying to go with the puck. Like, the defenseman is there, and he's like, all right, I want to go up the wall. And Douglas gets there in time and uses his long reach to, like, intercept the puck and disrupt the play. I'm just wondering, like, that takes some reps, right? Like he's got some hockey IQ to utilize his strengths, basically, to understand, okay, this is a strength of mine. I can use it in a very effective way, even though I'm not a guy with blazing speed, let's say.
Yeah. And honestly, I think he's a guy that he's relatively young. I think he's still, a guy in his early 20s, you're thinking about growing into your body. And I think he's growing into his game a little bit. And from a guy that, I would say I did I made a pretty good living getting in the way. And he can do that. He can get in the way, and having that great stick and being able to just anticipate, because sometimes it's a little bit of an anticipation, and realizing where you're going to put your stick and when can really make the difference between just getting a little touch on a puck that's going to kind of put it in a spot where it's going to cause a turnover. And it's not necessarily always, the guy that turns the puck over. It's forcing the person to put it in a spot maybe he doesn't necessarily want to. So just judging by where that stick is. So he's going to be an interesting story for me. And I think that he's a guy that seems to have the right attitude. He's kind of immersed himself in the dressing room early, and it seems like a really likable guy. But there's certain things, and especially if you want that role of somebody that's going to be kind of that truculent type of tough guy, 6'9", you cannot teach that. You can't go down to the Syracuse and teach someone to be 6'9". And he's just he's going to be an interesting thing guy. I don't know if he's going to be in the lineup every night, and maybe that's okay. They can really work on his game and work on some of the finer details of what's going to make him important. But it's good. I'm interested also, before I kind of get off on a train of thought, is like, what does he look like with Girgensons on his line? Those guys are heavy forechecking guys and guys that kind of get on it. And I think Gergie is going to be a really good influence on him, depending on where he slots in the lineup. But I think that that could be a combination there as well.
Kobe, great stuff. As always, we appreciate talking hockey with you. We'll make sure we listen to the podcast and all the great guests that you guys have been having on. And we'll see you at the rink soon.
Guys, appreciate you guys. Have a good one.
All right.
Thanks, Kobe.
Braydon Coburn joining us. Notice
he's
how I brought him
Douglas.
Yeah, well, it's in many ways it's an easy target for fans to say, well, this guy can't play. He just goes out there and has a stage fight, and he's only playing 5-6 minutes. What's he doing?
He's so big.
Yeah.
And you can see how much bigger he is than a lot of other big players on the ice, that his skating is not going to look like Eric Heiden. I'm dating myself here. Eric Heiden won 5 gold medals in the Olympics, in the Winter Olympics, going back to my childhood.
Dave, who is that? For the who is that?
All right, think of somebody else. All right, think of a guy. Look, he is not Braydon Point with the explosiveness.
That's right.
Of the quickness and the 0 to whatever in 5 seconds. A big man like that, it's just going to be more difficult for him, but he can use the things that he does have in his toolbox. First of all, he can improve. I mean, I think that's what Kobe is trying to say. And, the technique of skating, maybe he can improve on that. I think he's improved already. I mean, like, he grew the 8 inches in whatever it was 3 months. Since then, he's grown 1 inch since he was a teenager, but he's filled out his body. And I think that was an adjustment period for him, and he has made that adjustment. But I think that he is able to use his strengths to his advantage, and his strengths are getting in the way. He is a big man. As long as he can get there, it doesn't really matter how he looks getting there. As long as he gets there in time, he can utilize his long reach, because 6'9" is not just about your height. It's about most players who are 6'9". Yeah. Chara, think of him. They have the long reach. What an advantage that is. You can reel a puck in that is out of the reach of most other players. So, yeah, I like how Kobe put that, getting in the way. I think Douglas has gotten in the way in the offensive zone for the Lightning for some defenders who are trying to make a play out of trouble. And again, this is very limited because he's not played a lot. But when that line has been in the defensive zone and Douglas has had a chance to do something with the puck to alleviate pressure, I think he's done it. So we'll see if that is something he can continue to do. It's going to be important because you have said, what's the most important thing for a guy like that? Don't get scored on, right? So what are you doing in the defensive zone when you're in the defensive zone? Make the smart, simple play, get out of trouble. I think he's done that.
For sure. And I think when you're 6'9", and as long as you're not a liability skating, and Kobe just said he's a pretty good skater. I think a lot of people look at it and maybe they don't see that, but he doesn't have that far to go. You mentioned the reach and the skating. I mean, he could just be a decent skater partner, and he's able to impact things a little differently than somebody who's 5'10", who plays a similar game. So I think that's why, in part, they brought him in. I don't think in today's game you can have too many Georges Larocques out there. Where, I mean, Larocque could play a little bit, maybe in his earlier days when he was a little more adept
pretty
at doing
good skater. I mean, I remember about him.
I think towards the end, like he was a guy that would drop the gloves. Bottom line is, whether that was a good example or not, I don't think in today's NHL you can have a guy who strictly fights. I just don't think you can. I think you need to have the ability to play in some capacity. And clearly, look, at the AHL level, he could. He played a number of games. So it wasn't like
goals.
Yeah, it wasn't like this guy was a stiff. So there is part of his game that's there that the coaching staff obviously sees and the organization saw to bring him in. The biggest drawing card was, boy, he really addresses a need too, which is you touch one of our guys, he can play every night. He also can defend us. So his main drawing card is that he's big and he can fight, but he doesn't play for this team if he can't skate a little and doesn't know how to play.
Right.
You know, so I think we have to be fair in his progress. And look, he's still a young player. I mean, that, you know, relatively speaking, whether it's age-wise or whether it's just NHL experience, it's going to take him a little time. And the Lightning are basically saying we're willing to invest in this guy to see if this works out because it's worth it.
As Kobe said, they're not looking for him to grow anymore, no more inches, but to grow his game. And we'll see if they're able to do that, and he is able to do that. It's still early days. I mean, it's 6 games. Yeah. And he didn't play every game. So we'll see if he's in tomorrow. I was looking at the Hawks lineup. They had their rookie dinner last night. I ran into my longtime friend John Weideman at practice because the Hawks were skating out in Brandon too. And he said, yeah, they had their rookie dinner last night. I was like, why'd you guys come in 2 days early? That was why. So they never have the rookie dinner the night before a game. So I'm not quite sure where they went. There are a lot of great options in Tampa, certainly. But it is a young team, the Chicago team. And, you know, I'm looking at their roster. So Bedard is still quite young. You know, he just turned 20. They have the second overall pick in 2024 when you're struggling mightily and finishing near the bottom of the standings. A lot of times you're going to get high draft picks. That might have been a year that they were slated to finish first and they got leapfrogged in the lottery. I can't remember, but Levshinov is his name. He's Belarusian, but he's been playing in the U.S. for a number of years. He played in the USHL. So he just turned, actually he has not yet turned 20. He turns 20 next week. And I'm just looking at some of these other guys. Sam Renzel, he's 21. Nazar, who burst on the scene kind of last year, he is 21. I mean, some of these guys probably had to pay for the rookie dinner if they didn't get enough games last year in the NHL. We saw last year the Hawks beat the Lightning. Yeah. Here in Tampa, Landon Slaggert scored a key goal. He's a little bit older. He is 23, but still certainly new to the NHL. So I'm not sure how many of these guys are quote unquote that are going to dance with Douglas, let's say. Yeah, right. There may be one or two here that I'm just missing or I'm not thinking of. I mean, Tyler Bertuzzi can be tough, but you know, I think they probably would prefer to have him on the ice. Louis Crevier is another guy, young defenseman that they're high on. So
yeah, I mean,
they're trying to be, you know, a team that is pulling itself out of the wilderness back into relevance, but it has been a very, very long road out of relevance into the wilderness where they have not been able to get out of the muck. I mean, you think about it, they lost
When's the last time they were in the playoffs?
So they beat the Lightning in 2015. They made the playoffs in 2016. They lost to the Blues. I want to say that was in the first round. They have not made the playoffs since, if you were excluding the bubble.
Yeah, let's exclude that.
Did they win? They may have actually won their play-in series in the bubble. And so if I'm remembering right, they may have actually had a playoff series. But the only reason that they would have gotten there is that they took extra teams, right? If they just had the regular.
Everybody got a ticket to the playoffs.
Well, but then you had to win the play-in, which I think they did.
Yeah.
And then they got obliterated. I think they played Colorado in the quote-unquote first round, and they got
hammered.
Yeah, they got hammered. So
it's funny, Chicago and Detroit have been two teams that, were, playoff type
similar.
teams. It's taken them a while to figure it out. And some would say,
similar.
Does Chicago have more high-end skill? Although Detroit looked
Chicago has had a steeper fall because they won the 3 cups in 6 years, and Detroit was starting to fade around that time.
Yeah, and
Chicago has had a lot of controversy.
Yeah, for sure,
a lot of controversy, front office controversy, the whole
players,
Quenneville, which he was, certainly one of the. He's back in the NHL. In fact, the Lightning see Chicago on Thursday, and then they see Quenneville and the Ducks. Anaheim comes in on Saturday. So it has just been a really rough time for, let's be honest, a very proud organization.
Yeah. Well, and Taves have
original
move on,
6.
right? Yeah. Those guys are gone. And
they moved on from Taves. That was some, injury, COVID, long COVID, all of
illness.
That. Good to see that Taves is back, but they traded Kane. They moved on from Kane. So they're trying to figure it out. I mean, there's no doubt they have some good young players. We can get more into the Hawks tomorrow. And the fact that they've won here in Tampa the last 2 years, like with Bedard in the lineup, the Hawks have played the Lightning well. The Lightning won the 2 games in Chicago each of the last 2 years, but it has been close. Like last year, they needed a Gensel 6th attacker goal to get the game to overtime.
Yeah.
So they're going to need to be ready. Because even when the Hawks have been missing the playoffs by however many points, they've beaten the Lightning in each of the last 2 years.
Sure.
So I think the Lightning will be ready. I mean, Kobe talked about it. It's like it has to be on now, right? They've had 4 days, or they will have had 4 days to get over the road trip, which I agree with Kobe. That was a tough opening season stretch. It was not ideal that they lost the first 2 at home in regulation. So now it's a reset, but you got to come out ready to go. So this is a reset, and it's not just a continuation of what we've seen through the first 6 games, at least a portion of the first 6 games. I mean, Coop is right. They've had some strong moments, but unfortunately they've had a lot of moments that were far from strong.
FKA 322, should the top players have played more preseason games? They have looked really rusty.
That was something that we bandied about, and you asked Kobe about it. Look,
interesting his answer, by the way.
Yeah,
I mean, he talked about we talked about preseason being very successful, but wasn't that because of the depth maybe we thought they had found with younger guys?
I think the preseason was very beneficial for the players, many of whom are in Syracuse right now.
Yes,
but it's over and done with. I didn't catch the fan's name, but whoever that was, it is over and done with. And next year, when teams are mostly going to be playing, 4 to 5, it is just going to be quieter. Like it's going to be a shorter offseason. Sorry, it's going to be a shorter preseason, which means that the NHL regulars are only going to get a game or 2. So this is going to become the norm.
I would agree. I don't put a ton of stock in the preseason. I think
I know.
It's easy to
He's
do that
talking
now.
about the fan, or maybe it was a she. The fan was talking about the reps, though, and kind of getting in sync.
That's fair. I get that. That's a fair question. Tampa Bay says it seems like the Crozier injury was like the Moser injury last year.
Well, based on what we've heard from John Cooper at Tampa Bay, that is not true. I mean, the Moser injury. So we saw Crozier basically bend his ankle. I'm not sure that was what happened to Moser last year. He was going back on a puck in the defensive zone in Calgary and fell. But we knew pretty soon after the injury, Coop was like, this is not going to be a short-term thing. This is like week to week into month to month. It was 2 months. He's not said that about Crozier. He's like day to day, probably more day to day than week to week. He's not back out on the ice yet. So Tampa Bay, from that standpoint, yes, we have not seen him since he sustained the injury. But, the Lightning are fairly forthcoming when it's a longer-term injury. And we haven't heard that about Crozier. I certainly hope that it's not going to be 2 months.
Yeah. He was playing pretty well, too. I think
Yes.
we agreed that. Boomer says it seems Julian is extra concerned about waivers this year, protecting those who may be claimed and claiming those who may be valuable. To me, the Destut recall and Geeky reassignment has more to do with waivers than the actual player. Why do you think there's a focus on waivers this year? Perhaps the cap rising is making less options through free agency? Thanks for the show.
Yeah, Boomer, you're kind of going to, like, if there's a ledge, you're going a little farther out on the ledge than I am comfortable going, and probably you too, Greg. I mean, you said quite a bit during the preseason, Greg, that the guys who were waiver exempt, like, it just makes more sense, right? To get those guys down. Geeky was one guy who made the team who was waiver exempt. I think that was a factor in him going down. But do I think that Julian is like, we have 3 guys that we could send down, and we're sending Geeky is the least deserving to go down, but we're sending him down because he's waiver exempt? I don't think it's that. I think that they see value in Geeky going down and playing, which is what we've talked about. You've talked about it more than I have, but, playing in the top 6, getting these all situation reps, power play, 6-on-5, maybe 5-on-6, maybe they use him at center, playing a lot.
Yeah.
There's value in that for a guy who's in his second pro year, and get his game back where he has some swagger. What Kobe talked about is accurate, that like you're 11th overall.
Yeah.
You're like, this guy was taken, I don't have the draft year in front of me. Let's say this guy was taken a couple of spots behind me. He's been in the NHL for 2 years. Where am I? Mm-hmm. You start to have doubt creep in. I think that's what Kobe was talking about. But
yeah.
Boomer's point was, Julian is like, waiver exempt, waiver eligible, must stay in this lane. I don't think it's that. They've sent a bunch of guys down who did have to clear waivers. I think that this is one part of the equation, but not the whole part of the equation.
Yeah, and I think, too, there is a mental hurdle that a young player who was a high draft pick has to get over quickly, which is very hard, is if you're not sticking with the NHL club and having immediate success.
Yeah.
Because I think Geeky, let's face it, this isn't to suggest that he is going to fall into this. There have been a lot of first-round picks that end up being third and fourth liners.
Mm-hmm.
And what have we always said? Basically, once you get beyond the 7th or 8th overall pick, it's a little bit of a crapshoot. Now, that may change because parity, all these guys have skills coaches coming up. It feels like the talent level has increased from that perspective. And that doesn't mean you can't find star players in the 3rd and 4th rounds or even the 22nd overall pick in the 1st round. I get that. But this league is littered with former first-round picks who are now 3rd and 4th liners. Girgensons being one of them.
Yeah.
It really is. So it's not uncommon for a player like Geeky to be in this position. I think what is going to be very telling is in the next year or two, where does it break? Does he become a go-to guy for the Lightning potentially in a building block in a top 6? Or does he become an integral part of the team, but he's more on the depth side?
You know what really might benefit him is the path that his brother has taken. Different situation.
Well,
Morgan Geeky. So Morgan Geeky was not 11th overall, but he wasn't a 6th or 7th round pick either. It was a 3rd round pick of Carolina. And he spent multiple years in the minors before he got his shot at the NHL level. And even when he got his shot at the NHL level, he was kind of in and out of the lineup in Carolina. Now, again, he didn't stay with the organization that drafted him. I don't think that is what the Lightning have in mind for Connor Geeky. They would like him to grow within their organization. But Morgan Geeky was in and out of the lineup in Carolina, when he was in, like he was finding his game. They moved him to Seattle. Right. He goes to Seattle. Maybe he signed in Seattle. I can't remember. And I should actually pull up his stats, so I'm not speaking just off of maybe spotty memory, but he was part of a very effective fourth line the year that Seattle made the playoffs and knocked off Colorado in the first round. So kind of on the strength of that year, he goes to Boston. Year one in Boston, he scored almost 20 goals.
Yeah.
Like his role evolved, but he earned it. Last year, he scored over 30 goals.
Fair point.
So where Morgan Geekie was as a 21-year-old is way different than where he is now. This is Connor's brother. I mean, you can just look at his brother's experience. Different body type, different skill set maybe. You know, like one's a lefty, one's a righty.
And
I understand all
too.
of that. But, you know, to the point of like, if Connor Geekie is like, why is this other guy who's my age, you know, excelling in the NHL? You can look at his brother and be like, Morgan took a few years to kind of grow into the player that he is now. He's a 30-goal scorer in the NHL.
Sure. It's a great point.
It's a great story. Morgan Geekie's story is a great story.
And I'm wondering if obviously they talk.
Yeah.
If his older brother is able to be a good sounding board for this.
Yeah.
Be patient.
I mean, he said as much when he got sent down last year that Morgan kind of propped him up, and
it's great. I mean, it's
Yeah.
if you can't relate to your brother who's been in a potentially similar circumstance, who can you relate to?
right.
You know, I get it. Colton says, might have missed this already, but with Girgensons skating on the fourth line but not playing tomorrow, are we expecting 11-7?
So the Lightning do have 12 forwards without Girgensons. So I kind of muffed that at the beginning of yesterday's show because I forgot Kucherov was sick. Kucherov is back. So Girgensons was skating on the fourth line, rotating in and out today and presumably yesterday. Coop said Girgensons, they were looking at the weekend. So if Girgensons doesn't play tomorrow, the Lightning could dress 12 forwards. They've not gone 11-7 yet this year. But yes, it is possible that they could scratch a forward and go 11-7. Looking at tomorrow's game. If Girgensons is able to play, though, over the weekend, I would expect that we will see 12-6 over the weekend if Girgensons is in, unless we have something else happen between now and then.
Let me see if we have any more questions starting to trickle in. This is a good one. Caveman, in response to Bolt's breakdown about Julian being extra concerned about waivers, he said perhaps the new limits on the long-term IR relief are also making teams protect talent. Since the cushion is less, paper transactions are also prohibited since travel is obligated. Less small relief is available as well.
Yeah. You can't be a slave, though, to these, we'll call them hurdles. And if you feel like you need to call a player up and send a player down, the only players you have available to send down have to go through waivers. You know, in other words, Boomer and this other fan, do I think that Julian will hesitate to make a move to improve the team because he's worried about losing a player on waivers? I do not. I do not think that is a deal breaker of what we know of Julian.
Yeah.
He is a bold general manager. He makes bold moves when he feels moves have to be made. So to this point, he's kind of worked around the edges once we got through training camp and he sent the players down who needed waivers, they cleared. So now you got a window of 30 days. These players can go up and down. We're less than 30 now, but you know what I mean. Destu is an example of a guy like he can keep going up and down, at least for now. But I think if push comes to shove and he's like, we need somebody else to come up and to create that spot, we have to send somebody down and that player has to clear waivers. Do I think that Julian will not make that move? I think Julian would make that move. I don't think the fear of losing a player on waivers is going to prohibit him from making an ancillary move that he thinks is necessary. Do I think that he will send a player through waivers willy-nilly, though? No. And maybe that's what the fans are getting at.
Could be.
It almost seems like, whether it was Boomer's comment and then the fan responded to Boomer, that, like, had Geekie been waiver eligible, or there had been another player that was waiver exempt, it wouldn't have been Geekie to go down. And I'm not certain that that's the case for the reasons that, you've talked about it a lot, and so did Kobe, that there is benefit to a young player going to the minors and getting those reps. I think that is part of why this move was made. And Coop said as much when he was asked yesterday after practice.
He did. By the way, tonight, enjoy some Reef Rum, smooth, versatile, now pouring at Benchmark International Arena. Order our Tropical Wave or Lightning Mule, and taste why fans are switching. Reef Rum is a premium craft Florida local rum built on authenticity, quality, and easy drinkability. Ask for Reef Rum by name. Go Bolts. Enjoy responsibly. Partner, we'll be back at it again tomorrow, noon to 1, getting ready for a game as well.
Earlier start tomorrow in case you're coming to the game or tuning in.
That's
6:45 on ESPN Plus.
That's right. As Steve
and
said,
of course,
Greg,
Lightning Radio.
Greg, you got to be out of your pregame segment by 6:39.
Make sure you're in your pregame seat
Get out.
at least 15 minutes earlier.
We will do that. Partner, great job as always.
You too.
Thanks to Braydon Coburn, Steve Ersnick for producing. We always appreciate that. And for everybody listening, thank you. I am Greg Linnelli. You've been listening to Power Lunch on Lightning Radio.